Tonight, there is no king to rally behind, no fierce battle etched into memory. Instead, winter grips Dark Age Britain quietly but relentlessly, sneaking through a leaky roof, soaking into damp wool, chilling bare hands, and settling deep into the body long before the day truly begins. You wake in a low, smoky hut. The fire's glow has all but vanished. The blanket lies cold and stiff around its edges. The only warmth left is someone else's breath lingering in the cool air. Above you, the thatch roof is heavy with melting frost. Beneath, the straw has been crushed flat, offering a bed that feels less comforting and more like a warning. Outside, everything is coated in a frozen, gray silence. Inside, the day holds but one pressing question. Can you coax even a flicker of heat from the dying ashes to make this place bearable again? No king tonight. No battle lines drawn. No shining helmets catching the winter light for a chronicle's glory. Just the stark reality of winter in Dark Age Britain, creeping through cracks and holes, seeping into damp cloth, biting into bare skin, embedding itself into the very bones before the morning has a chance to fully breathe. You wake in that same low, smoky hut, where the fire teeters on the edge of death, the blanket's edges cold and unyielding. Someone's breath hangs as the last warmth in the room. The thatch above drips with melting frost. The straw beneath is flattened and unforgiving. Outside is a frozen gray expanse. Inside, only one question persists. Will enough heat rise from the ashes to make this place livable once more? This is how winter makes its mark here. Not with dates or grand campaigns. Not with a heroic moment altering kingdoms' fates. Winter slips in quietly, through dripping roofs, smoke that clings stubbornly to rafters, damp cloth clinging coldly to skin before dawn. A morning where the first feeling upon waking isn't hunger, thought, or even dread, but the body's silent acknowledgement that it has been sleeping alongside the cold and must now reckon with it again. Around you, the room remains shrouded in shadows. The pale gray light creeps in slowly, too faint to brighten, only enough to map out shapes. The low ceiling, rugged walls, the dark hearth at the center. Bodies huddle close in sleep. No one here wastes warmth on privacy. A figure curls close beneath a cloak steeped in smoke, lanolin, and the scent of old rain. Another sleeper has pulled the blanket away during the night, leaving a cold line tracing your shoulder where wool no longer shields you. The blanket offers no luxury, only weight. Rough, heavy, slight dampness where the roof surrenders the night drop by drop. Patches of meltwater linger in the thatch above. The roof doesn't fail outright. It yields patiently. A cold drop lands near your neck, then another by your arm. The entire hut breathes in dampness. The hearth, barely alive with embers, holds the gravest importance. It is, more than anything else within these walls, the difference between mere survival and succumbing to the merciless cold. The fire from yesterday has dwindled to nothing more than cold ashes and a faint hint of fading warmth. There's no lively flame to welcome the morning. No cozy glow filling the home, no assurance that comfort survived the night without struggle. If any warmth lingers amid those ashes, it's buried low, faint, fragile, the kind that needs careful tending, nourishment, and gentle coaxing. It's the heartbeat of the room, quietly supporting all who dwell within it. You don't rise immediately. Not just yet. In that fleeting, half-awake moment, you remain wrapped in straw and wool, sharing the warmth of bodies huddled together, letting your skin sense the room before your mind can respond. The air outside the blanket is sharply cold, enough to make you pause. Your hands stay nestled close. Your shoulders remain curled inward. This is a sacred pause, the quietest gentlest breath before the day unfolds. Because here, in a home like this, survival begins before words are spoken, before anyone requests water, before the pot warms on the fire, before children murmuring or tools being raised, or the door opening to the yard and the chill beyond. The first task is always the same: to leave behind whatever remaining warmth is held close and move toward the cold center of the room. There, the dead fire sits, waiting to be persuaded back to life. This simple act captures the true winter drama here. Not one of conquest, but of endurance. Not tales of glory, but endless repetition. Not the clash of great kingdoms, but the quiet, relentless labor of keeping enough warmth today to live for tomorrow. History often tells of crowns, borders, battles, treaties, the loud, grand moments immortalized by monuments. But in winter, within a humble hut like this, history shrinks, taking shape in the scale of fingers, breath, glowing embers, straw bedding, damp timber walls, and the fragile divide between sleeping through the night or facing despair. The struggle is immediate. It lives in the room, in the body, in how cold transforms every mundane task into a battle for survival. And here, even the smallest ember holds more weight than any crown. So the room remains silent a moment longer. The sleepers stay quiet. The roof lets fall another lonely drop of water. The gray dawn presses gently against the walls. Somewhere beneath the ash, maybe, a single slender thread of heat endures. And before the day can truly start, someone must rise from the straw and breathe life back into the fire. The hearth is cold as you kneel beside it, not waiting or resting, but a void, cold to its core, with only ash where there should be warmth and a dark little hollow where the room pins all its hopes. Above, the smoke hole offers little relief. It draws heat when every bit is precious, giving the smoke no clear way out. The hut still holds yesterday's scent of soot and damp wood, but smell is a poor comfort in winter. It doesn't warm hands or soften the straw. It cannot keep a family alive till morning. So this comes first. Before a single word is spoken, before food is prepared, before anyone can fully reclaim their humanity after the long night, there is one task that must be done. Someone seeking the last remnants of warmth must crawl out and kneel in the gray half-light, coaxing fire back to life from near nothingness. Carefully, you push aside the ash. The motion demands caution. Too rough, and the fragile spark beneath might vanish forever. Too gentle, and the cold will claim its victory through patience. Beneath the soft gray dust lies perhaps the faintest ember, no flame yet, barely even a glow. Just a small hidden memory of heat where the night failed to extinguish it. You lean closer, shoulders wrapped tightly against the chill, your fingers stiff and aching with cold, watching that tiny red point flicker weakly in response to the air. Around you lie the morning's meager offerings, a few thin sticks, straw pulled apart by hand, and a pinch of old moss, dried as well as possible in a place where dampness clings to almost everything. None of these seem adequate, but that's part of the ritual here. Morning never breaks with abundance. It begins with scraps, patience, and the quiet determination to persuade fragile materials into warmth. You build a small nest from the gathered kindling, first straw, then moss, then the lightest sticks laid gently atop, not heavily or recklessly, but carefully, as though crafting a fragile breath rather than a roaring flame. This tiny structure is so frail that a single careless movement might undo it. Yet the entire room leans toward it without effort, the sleepers resting on straw, the low dark roof overhead, the damp walls enclosing the space, and the cold air itself. All hold their breath, waiting for what might or might not come. Then you lower your face and begin to blow, softly, gently. Never too much, never too eager. Fire at this hour resists urgency. It must be wooed. Your breath streams steadily through the straw. The ember brightens, then dims, then brightens again. Ash stirs around it. A thin thread of smoke rises and fades away. You wait. Another breath. Another small plume emerges, thicker this time, carrying the sharp, bitter scent of first burning moss. Behind you, the household stirs, not fully awake yet. Not quite. A muffled cough beneath wool. A shift of straw. You. Someone turning over. A child's small, unhappy cry of a body returning to cold consciousness. Here, morning does not enter through a window. It arrives on smoke and breath, and the understanding that if the hearth fails to live once more, the entire hut will remain at the mercy of darkness. You blow one more time. The ember answers. A tiny orange seam appears in the moss, flickering softly before closing up. You wait patiently, offering another gentle breath. This time the straw catches at one edge, darkening and curling inward, sparking the first fragile thread of flame. It's not a grand or beautiful fire, not the roaring blaze of summer feasts or stories of kings and halls. Instead, it's small, hesitant, and stubborn. Yet, in this quiet room and this early hour, it transforms the morning entirely. Smoke fills the hut before warmth does. It gathers low, curling beneath the rafters, seeping into cloth, hair, and the throats already raw from too much smoke. Coughing ripples through the room, growing louder. Someone stirs near the wall. Another pulls a blanket tighter, turning instinctively toward the hearth, as happens every cold winter morning. The space wakes slowly around this fragile knot of glowing orange life. You add another twig, then one more, never rushing. A morning fire isn't won in an instant. It must be coaxed, fed with care, shielded from both haste and hope. The flame grows a little stronger. The sticks begin to respond. A quiet cracking breaks the stillness. Soft and almost tender. Light reaches down to the ash, the floor, then touches the nearest sleeping face. The hut, bit by bit, takes shape again. In wintry Britain, warmth isn't mere background comfort. It's a daily conquest, forged each morning by hand. Now hands inch closer. The body dares to believe in heat again, if only faintly. The room remains cold, the roof still leaks, and beyond the walls, the dull gray day waits, heavy with mud, frost, and hardship. But here, in the heart of the hut, life has returned to the hearth, bringing with it a fragile steadiness. Once the first flame catches, the entire house seems to breathe more slowly, more deeply. Words are few. None are needed. The labor has spoken clearly. The smoke, straw, moss, patient breaths, careful hands, and that small orange spark beneath the ash. They have together done what was necessary. For one more morning, the household has reclaimed its smallest, most vital form of safety. But fire alone won't suffice. The body still faces its own humbling duties before breakfast. Now comes a part of mornings no one can postpone for long. Though the fire has returned, barely, and the room begins to gather around that flickering ember, fire satisfies just one need. The body has others, old, unavoidable, insistent needs. So before breakfast, before the first warming bowl, before the day's full burden of chores unfurls, you must leave the hut and confront winter's sharpest indignity. Wrapping your cloak close, you rise from the fire's edge. Immediately, the cold finds you once more. It lurks away from the hearth, in the floorboards, the doorframe, in the chill air clinging near the walls, waiting patiently for any soul reckless enough to wander too far from the fire's warmth. You cross the room with quick, careful steps, feeling the packed earth beneath your feet and the thin drafts weaving through the hut as if they know every crevice better than its inhabitants. Behind you, someone coughs softly. Another shifts deeper into their blanket beside the fire. The room stirs, but only slightly. Morning here arrives in slow, hesitant layers. You lift the latch and step outside. The cold hits you instantly, not as a grand spectacle or a fierce windstorm from northern tales, but as a flat, unyielding certainty that slips under thin cloth and finds bare skin. It nips first at your face, then your wrists, then the vulnerable spot at your throat, where wool never quite hugs close enough. Your breath emerges in pale, fleeting bursts. The yard lies frozen in that muted gray winter shade, as if every surface has been scrubbed of color, left barren under the weather's grim hand. The ground is treacherous beneath your feet. Fragile crust of frost hides muddy earth. Melt water coats frozen ruts. Trampled straw near the door glistens slickly. Every step demands caution and testing, for nothing out here offers a gentle embrace. Behind you, the hut exhales a faint promise, a wisp of smoke drifting from the roof's gap. Ahead, the yard sprawls into the same old chores, the same biting cold, and that one utilitarian spot everyone endures because they must. The latrine awaits where such places always do, far enough to keep its worst odors from the hut, yet close enough that you won't lose feeling in your feet by the time you return. It is less a structure and more an apology. Splintered boards thrust into the ground at odd angles, a flimsy promise of privacy that never fully delivers. The earth around it is stiff and uneven. Here a slick patch, there frozen hard as bone. Nearby, a small black crow perches silently, its winter stillness eerie, as if it's come merely to witness another uneasy human truce with the relentless season. You do not hurry more than you must. Rushing worsens the unstable footing. Still, the body insists, and winter makes no allowances for dignity or discomfort. With fingers stiff from cold, you fumble to adjust your clothing. The wind seeps through the gaps between boards with sharp, callous threads of air, finding bare skin with cruel precision. Your knees ache as you lower yourself. Your breath shortens, and your legs begin losing warmth where fabric no longer shields adequately. Nothing about this act is noble. That's the haunting intimacy of this history. No banners waving, no speeches made, no witnesses worth seeking. Just the body, exposed to cold air, striving to accomplish a small, essential task before the day's harsher demands resume. The earth accepts all it is given. The wind protests still. The crow watches on without turning away. When it's over, the practical work lies ahead. Leaves, when there are leaves. Moss, when the moss is there. Sometimes, if the household is wealthy enough to spare a cloth, a rarity, it might be used, but usually it's not an option. Winter shrinks these choices even further. The materials become rough, the hands numb. Cleanliness in these moments feels less like comfort and more like endurance. Snow lies close by, but it's cold, sharp against the skin, making your body tense before it even touches. Still, you use it. Because today, this morning, there's simply no better alternative, and probably none for tomorrow either. The shock of cold is sharp at first, then over time becomes familiar. That's how most things are in a season like this. The first contact startles you, The next one becomes just another part of the day. You draw the cloth back into place carefully, rise with measured movements, waiting a moment for the blood to remember its path again. The cold shifts once the task is done. It's not kinder, only less humiliating. Your feet move slightly against the frozen earth. Your hands find their way back to usefulness. Nearby, a crow tilts its head with calm indifference, unimpressed by it all, while the yard remains gray and unmoved. History, in moments like these, is never grand. It's awkward, physical, repetitive, and impossible to avoid. It lives in bent knees, raw fingers, hurried breath, rough moss, damp hems, and the quiet indignities that people stop naming because they happen too often to surprise anymore. This is not history of monuments or great events. This is the history of bodies that keep going simply because the day allows no other choice. Still, the mind adapts to almost anything when the only option the day offers is to continue. So, you set the boards back as they were, more or less, and turn toward the hut. A hint of the fire inside has grown stronger. You can smell it beneath the morning air, smoke and damp wood, with the quiet promise of a room that remains poor, cold, and crowded, but is just a bit better than the yard outside. One misery is behind you. The next waits in simpler forms: food, water, and enough heat to keep the body moving through the rest of the day. Breakfast here is no source of pleasure. It arrives neither with abundance nor surprise. No one wakes expecting delight from it. Instead, what comes is something older, plainer. A bowl of reheated survival, lifted again toward the fire and made just warm enough to carry the body into the next stretch of the day. The pot sits near the hearth. It always seems to be there, blackened by smoke, crusted at the rim, holding the memories of countless meals in its dark interior. When someone leans in and stirs, the contents soften slowly, as if the night had stiffened them, and the modest morning fire must coax them back toward warmth. A faint wisp of steam rises, not much, only enough to scent the air with barley, damp heat, and the muted earthy aroma of food resigned to be nothing more than necessary. Barley again. Barley stretches thin with water, thickening as it stands, then thinning again when reheated. Somewhere between porridge and broth, hovering between a meal and a daily ritual. If a root finds its way in, that's luck. If a stubborn herb survives until the pot, that's a memory of warmer seasons past. Most mornings, it's just barley, smoke, and whatever warmth the hearth can muster. The bowls emerge one by one. There's a chipped bowl, a cracked one, and another that wobbles faintly when placed on the floor because its bottom has been worn uneven. None of them match, nor do they need to. They're simply the vessels the household still owns. The spoon you lift is rough along the handle, worn smooth in some spots by years of use, yet still splintered in others. You already know where your thumb mustn't rest. Winter teaches not only what is scarce, but also how to remember every worn thing by hand. Around the fire, the family gathers in quiet. It's not a heavy silence, just the gentle hush of bodies not quite ready to spend their energy on words. Someone settles heavily on a stool, cupping the bowl with both hands before tasting. A child leans too close to the rising steam, drawn more by warmth than appetite. Another, still half asleep, tightens their cloak and waits patiently for the ladle to come around. The room remains cold enough that breaths are visible when heads turn away from the hearth. But now, each pair of hands holds something warm, and that changes the morning. They eat slowly. The first mouthful brings more heat than flavor, settling deep into the chest. The second begins to feel like food. Barley clings slightly to the spoon and mouth, asking almost nothing of the teeth. Fortunate, since winter food is kinder to the hungry than to fragile, healing bodies. You swallow, and for a brief moment, sense the cold surrendering a small piece of territory inside you. In this place, That is no small thing. In a winter-bound household, scarcity is so absolute that ordinary comforts turn into luxuries without shifting their outward shape. A ladle full, a bowl that doesn't leak, a spoon dry enough not to slip from your grasp, a mouthful arriving warm instead of just edible. These are no grand gifts, yet the body receives them as if they were. And then there is the water. Always the water. Someone has already fetched it or will soon have to. Breaking the ice at the well, lowering the bucket, hauling it up with aching arms, carrying each precious drop home through cold. That splits the hands and stiffens the wrists. Every drop carries a story before it even reaches the house. Water for drinking, water for the pot, or water for washing a bowl, a face, or a wound, if any can be spared for such things. When the bucket arrives inside, the room shifts its focus. The change is subtle, almost imperceptible, marked only by a sharpened, practical attention reserved for what must not be wasted. Every drop counts. A single spill at the threshold is significant. A little water splashed on the floor is too much. The hands gripping the handle bear the marks of relentless cold and damp. Rudd, rough, cracked skin, lined with fine, painful fissures at the knuckles. Evidence of weeks spent battling the elements. The water itself catches the faint light, gleaming clean, and almost richer than its true worth. One could hardly honor silver with more care. This is how the morning measures time, not by hours or minutes, but by portions. How far can the pottage stretch? How much water can be spared? How long will the bowl retain its heat in chapped hands before the warmth dissipates? Will the spoon survive another day? Who gets the fuller ladle, the child or the elder? And will the pot still hold enough for later? Every small, everyday detail is weighted with meaning. Nothing here exists in isolation. Yet, amidst the austerity, there is solace found in routine. Even if that routine carries the bitter taste of smoke and barley, that is the softest part of it all. The room is humble, its bowls worn smooth by use. The spoons are rough-hewn, the food so plain it almost defies description. Still, the simple sequence anchors the mind. Fire first, then pot, then ladle, then bowl. Clasping hands around the gentle heat. The first swallow, then the second. The body knows this rhythm. It leans into familiarity, learning through repetition to trust that, however grueling the day ahead, this much at least belongs to the morning. One bowl empties, then another. Spoons scrape quietly. Someone wipes the last thick residue from the bowl's bottom using a finger, unwilling to waste even a single bit by letting it harden and spoil. A child licks the spoon's edge, and no one scolds. Here, waste is a ruder breach than any lost manners. The pot still holds a little, but only a little, and what remains will be reserved for another hour. The bowls are set aside, cloaks drawn tighter around chilled shoulders. Fingers twitch briefly above the fading fire before retreating back into sleeves and the tasks ahead. The warmth of breakfast was never meant to linger. It exists only to carry the body just far enough into the day to begin again. And with the last bite gone, the work turns outward, toward the walls, the roof, the straw, and the countless tiny places where the house itself demands care to keep the harsh season at bay. This hut is never simply there. It does not stand sentinel with the calm assurance of shelter, politely barring winter's touch while life thrives inside. Instead, it must be coaxed every day to continue standing between the household and the cold. The season finds fault quickly. A crack in the daub, a loosened patch of thatch, a seam where light leaks through when it should not. By the time breakfast's feeble warmth fades, the labor of holding the house together is already underway. No words are needed to express this. The room itself carries the unspoken understanding. A draft skims low across the floor, barely noticeable but persistent. Smoke drifts lazily toward one wall, drawn through a hidden gap where the air sneaks out. Above the corner where someone sleeps, a dark patch betrays the roof's slow surrender. Last night's snow melt, dripping down, relentless and patient. Near the door, the daub has cracked and retreated from the woven walls beneath it. The hut does not fail all at once. It gives way in small spots first, and winter is patient enough to exploit everyone. So the repairs begin, quietly and deliberately, one small spot at a time. A bundle of moss is pulled closer to the wall. Bracken is taken from a basket and gently shaken to separate it. Nearby, a pair of hands knead a mixture of mud, straw, and dung in a shallow pan, moving slowly and awkwardly, too cold to be graceful. The earthy, blunt smell fills the air. Familiar and ordinary. Connected to the walls, floors, livestock yards, all the practical things holding life steady against the elements. There is no luxury here for delicacy. You crouch beside a crack near the doorway. The fading light is thin but sufficient. Enough to see where the cold slips in, where your fingers must press moss deep into the gaps. You tuck bracken behind it, then smooth the damp mixture over the surface, coaxing everything to stay put. Your knuckles sting as you bend your hands, skin cracked from weeks of cold and wet. Moss catches on your roughened skin. The mud sticks unevenly, sometimes barely at all, sometimes too heavily. Winter has made your hands clumsy, but the wall is indifferent. It only demands to be mended. Across the room, someone climbs onto a stool to patch the thatched roof. The stool creaks under shifting weight, uncertain but faithful. Above, the straw has thinned where wind and rain have worn it away. A handful of fresh straw is pushed into the weakened spot, then another. The bundles are twisted and pressed, tied where possible. The work is slow and careful. Hurrying would mean poor shelter, and poor shelter invites the cold right inside. Below, old bedding is being pulled apart. The flattened straw is damp in places, stale with breath, wool and nights pressed too close together. New straw arrives in armfuls, laid down where sleepers will rest once the night returns. It's not soft, never truly soft, but newer and drier. And in a winter house, that difference is everything. A child, half asleep, shakes the old straw loose with quiet gravity. Dust rises. Fleeting glints of chaff catch the hearth's light. Then the fresh straw spreads into place, adding one more small layer of defense against the long night ahead. At the far wall, dung is pressed carefully into a widening seam, sealing the fragile gaps that winter exploits. The patch feels warm in the hand, but cools swiftly against the wall, sealing cracks unnoticed in summer yet starkly felt in winter's chill. The air thickens, heavy with the scent of smoke, damp wool, old ash, and the faint, biting sharpness of cold air sneaking in before the patch is finished. Eyes water, someone coughs, yet no one halts their work. This is the essence of the labor. Patch, do, press, lift, replace, smooth. Step down, move on to the next weak spot. A home in the Dark Age winter endures not because it is robust, but because weary hands endlessly mend it. This truth lies in every corner of the hut. The walls stand because someone keeps filling the cracks. The roof holds because someone climbs it to repair the leaks. The beds remain usable because someone replaces the straw. The room stays livable because people already cold, already hungry, already exhausted keep giving their strength to a shelter that never quite shields them fully. Yet the work follows its own rhythm. The body falls into this routine, willingly or not, one gap after another, one handful at a time, small repairs done before the season can turn a weakness into misery. It isn't easy, but the repetition steadies the mind. It structures the morning. It transforms fatigue into sequence, and sequence into endurance. In this endless mending, the body finds a rhythm akin to prayer. Not spoken words, but prayer in motion, moss pressed into cracks, straw lifted toward the roof, mud smoothed over frail patches, driven by the old faith that one more repair, however fragile, might hold through one more night. After the worst spots are patched, the room looks largely unchanged. Walls remain rough, the roof still uncertain, smoke weaving under the beams like a second weather. The earthen floor remains unchanged. The hut is still poor, yet somehow it has once again been persuaded to stand between the family and the harsh season. For now, that must suffice. But walls, roofs, and bedding only do so much when food grows scarcer. Bread harder and hunger becomes the truest weather inside the body. By this time, cold is no longer the sole force shaping the day. Hunger has settled in as well. Not a sudden crisis, not a sharp pain that comes and goes like weather, but a quiet, persistent presence. It lingers like smoke in the room, behind the eyes, settling in knees, nestling beneath ribs. It doesn't interrupt life. It becomes the background, so steady and familiar the body no longer greets it with surprise. This is winter scarcity's real cruelty, not its sudden wounds, but its lingering presence. You wake up with it. You eat it as your first taste of the day. You work alongside it, and when night falls, it waits silently for you to return with the dawn. Over time, the body stops hoping for any grand relief. Instead, it learns to endure in small doses. One bowl of pottage, one crust of bread, one root from the pot, a single swallow of something warm. Just enough sustenance, just enough to keep standing, just enough to keep moving forward, just enough, perhaps, to rise again tomorrow and face the same daily bargain anew. At the heart of this struggle is barley. Barley cooked into pottage. Barley softened with water. Barley thickened by sitting, then thinned again when reheated. Barley served at morning. Barley again at midday. Barley, tolerated more from habit than from any delight. It fills space in the belly, quiets the harshest pangs of hunger for a spell, and offers the body something to work on beyond itself. Yet, deep down, it doesn't satisfy. Barley simply keeps the household moving steadily from one task to the next. Then there are the turnips. Always turnips, or so many that memory blurs them into one long, pale root, stretching through the entire winter. They soften into sweetness in the pot, or something close to sweetness if the hunger has been long enough. Boiled, split, diluted, stretched, and shared, their scent rises from the hearth like a quiet promise, too modest to bring joy, yet too essential to let go. No one greets turnips with gladness exactly, but no one would dream of a pot without them either. And nettles, brought in whenever they can be found, along with bitter greens, old onions, a few leaves gathered in gentler weather, dried and stored, then added in small handfuls so slight They almost vanish once swallowed by the pot. Still, they make a difference. A sharpness on the tongue, a green note in the broth. Even the smallest change in flavor matters. In winter, variety itself becomes nourishing. The mouth clings to memory even when the bowl offers little else. Bread carries its own sorrow. When bread appears, it's often hard and stale by the time it reaches you. It breaks easily before it bends. It demands more from the jaw than the weary body is willing to offer. A crust must be soaked, held longer in the mouth, or dipped again and again in broth until it recalls softness. Yet it resists a little, as if winter has crept inside the loaf as deeply as it has settled over the hut. Still, the hand reaches for it. A hard crust remains bread. A stale bite is still something the body can turn into fuel. As for meat, it mostly belongs to absence, or to memory alone. Once, maybe, a rabbit served as a meal, or a deer caught in a past winter when luck and weather briefly aligned. Sometimes, a strip of salted meat that vanished faster than the household wished it would. These moments linger far longer in memory than on the tongue. Someone recalls a broth with real fat drifting atop its surface. Someone else remembers marrow. Another speaks of a bowl that did more than quiet hunger. It strengthened the body. Meals like these become stories almost instantly. Not because anyone intends to romanticize them, but because the very season transforms rarity into legend. This is how hunger reshapes the mind. It lowers expectations, yes, but it also makes memories glow with warmth. A person sitting with an emptying bowl doesn't dwell on what's left, but on what once was. Rabbit stewed out, a better loaf of bread, a spoonful of honey. Days when the pot held more than just barley and hope. Even tales of Roman feasts take on a strange, shimmering glow during such times. Cheese, wine, bread still soft when broken. Fish, herbs, fruit, oil. It scarcely matters whether these delicacies were sampled firsthand or only heard of through travelers, clerics, or men who have seen stone towns far away. The imagination embraces them regardless, drawing warmth from images the hand will never hold. Meanwhile, the body learns a different lesson. It learns to expect less. This lesson seeps in gradually. One day, a smaller ladle. The next, a thinner broth. Bread sliced finer. Roots counted more carefully. No meat this week. No fish. The jar's fat reserved only for some essential purpose. Yet still, the body rises. It still walks out to fetch wood, draws water, gathers straw. It bends toward the wall, lifts the bucket, kneels by the hearth, lies down at night, and collects strength to greet another dawn. That is why winter hunger isn't marked by drama. It doesn't flare up and vanish suddenly. Instead, it quietly becomes the backdrop to being alive. It lives in the wrists when they lift more than they should, in the legs when they tire too soon. In a slow way, people rise from the floor. It's in the careful eating, scraping bowls clean, saving crumbs, observing portions without overtly noticing them. Hunger settles so deeply into daily life that it stops announcing itself. It becomes part of posture, habit, the very room itself. Yet beneath it all, there is tenderness. Someone leaves the softer piece for a child. Someone says nothing but takes the smaller share. A careful scraping of the pot ensures nothing is wasted. Crust is silently broken and shared. No one names this kindness aloud, because spoken kindness would sound too grand for such a humble home. But it lives within the small adjustments, in the way one body senses another's need, and restrains its own wants just enough to keep the household going. The pot is never just a pot. It is arithmetic, memory, and endurance all simmering together. How much grain remains? How thin can the water be stretched today? Will the turnips last? Will the loaf still be there tomorrow? Is the child coughing more? Does the old man need a warmer bowl? Every meal sits at the center of a web of decisions, reaching far beyond itself, into the coming morning, the next change in weather, the uncertain days ahead. When hunger stretches on long enough, even memories begin to taste warm. So the bowl empties slowly. The spoon lingers, scraping the bottom for every last crumb, because waste is unthinkable and habit now stronger than hunger. The body isn't full. It was never meant to be full. It is only steadied, just enough. And steadiness must become comfort. Then the bowl is set down. The room slips back into its winter rhythms. The fire dies down. Rough, underfed hands return to the work the season demands. Afternoon bends once again toward the same hard answer. Firewood, tools, and another walk out into the cold. The house consumes wood faster than the land can kindly provide. By afternoon, the little warmth won in the morning has already begun to fade around the edges. The fire still burns, but less boldly now, a smaller flame as if aware of how long the dark will stretch and how little comfort waits beside it. A winter hut is never warmed just once and left in peace. It must be fed again and again, like some blunt, hungry creature crouched at the room's heart, always asking for more than the day can offer. So the afternoon bends toward wood once more. Not by choice, but because evening's question is coming soon, and the only answer is fuel. You pull your cloak tighter, turn your hands toward the fading heat one last time, then step back from the hearth. There is no ceremony here, just the old understanding. If the branches don't come in now, this room will grow colder faster than the family can bear. Outside, the ground has softened into a harsher cold. Not the hard certainty of morning frost, but wetness over frost, mud over ice, the sort of treacherous ground that pulls at your boots, letting go reluctantly. Each step clings to the worn leather, which no longer offers true protection. Thin in places, cracked in others. Stitching loosening. One side already lets in dampness, so by the time you cross the yard, the cold creeps inward through sodden cloth and worn hide. The woodpile waits with its usual faint disappointment. A few sticks, a few branches, bark stripped from older pieces, laid aside, because even bark has its uses here. Nothing dry enough to trust completely. Nothing plentiful enough to lift the spirit. Winter makes every useful thing a lesser version of itself. Wood comes wet. Rope stiffens. Hands numb. Hatchets dulled. Even the pile looks less like a stash of supplies, more like an apology. Still, you sort through it. You pick up a branch light enough to carry, another that might be worth splitting, and a few smaller pieces that could catch flame if laid close enough to a patient spark. You lift them, test their weight, knock two together, listen carefully to the sound they make. The best wood is never where you want it. What's left is all that remains, and by afternoon, it's too late for wishing. Sometimes, the pile isn't nearly enough, so you push further, toward the edge of the trees where fallen limbs lie half sunk in frozen earth, as though the ground means to keep them forever. You bend and pull. One branch cracks loose with a brittle snap. Another refuses to budge. Your hatchet, when it lands, cuts less than persuades, dully falling again and again until the wood gives way, surrendering more to exhaustion than force. That becomes your rhythm. Lift, dot, strike, adjust your grip. Strike again. Bend to gather smaller pieces. Scrape, bark. Shift the bundle higher against your arms. Wipe your damp fingers on wool that's already soaked through. The skin on your knuckles pulls and splits from the cold. One finger stings sharply, but you don't stop. In a season like this, no one stops for small bleeding unless it becomes a flood. And even then, only once the wood is gathered. There's a certain bleak absurdity in it all. The house cries out for dry heat, but the land offers only wet branches. The hands sent to fetch fuel are the very ones the cold tries to stiffen into uselessness. The boots meant for the walk let the weather sneak in. The hatchet needed to split wood has long forgotten its edge. Even success arrives in the form of damp branches that must dry before they'll truly burn. And yet, this is what afternoon still means. You carry the branches back anyway. An armful of poor wood. A few sticks clutched at your side. Damp bark tucked in the crook of your elbow. Breath whitening in the cold air ahead of you. Fingers sore. Boots heavier than when you set out. The light dims, turning the yard gray once more. And the hut's lone smoke wisp from the roof hole offers a faint promise. That's enough to keep you moving. Inside, you lean the branches beside the hearth. That is the first small comfort. Not because this is good wood, but because it is wood. And with wood comes possibility. Even damp branches change when near fire. They steam, soften, and begin to imagine burning. One by one, you arrange them so the heat can reach them. Not too close to waste the precious flame, not too far for the room to work its quiet magic before dark. The smell rises immediately. Wet bark, smoke, old sap, and the faint sweetness of wood slowly surrendering itself to usefulness. You turn your hands back to the fire once more. Slowly, carefully. The sting of returning warmth is sharper than the cold itself at first, but it soon fades, giving way to that quiet feeling the body has longed for, not quite comfort, but the promise of it. Around you, the evening begins to settle over the room. Someone nudges the pot closer to the flame. Another shakes water from a wet hem. A smaller stick is placed across the glowing coals. The house, sustained now by just a few scrappy branches, feels a little less exposed, a little more protected. Even a handful of poor branches beside the hearth can shift the whole mood of an evening. Nothing has gotten easier. The wood remains damp. The boots demand mending, and the hatchet is still blunt. Yet, the sight of fuel feeding the fire brings a calm to the mind. It whispers that this room may hold out a while longer, that the night will have to fight harder to creep inside. As the light outside dims and the yard sinks into shadow, the family turns inward, drawing not only toward the hearth's glow but toward one another, and soon toward the animals too. Because in winter, even warmth must be gathered by hand. Night offers no real peace. It brings us home. When the last gray light vanishes from the doorway and the yard is swallowed up by the deep, enduring blue of long winter darkness, the household has closed in. The outdoor tasks have ceased for now. Branches, hauled in through mud and cold, lean damp and fragrant of wet bark beside the fire as it struggles to coax their heat. Bowls are scraped clean. Cloaks are drawn tight. Hands hover close to flames, soaking up their fragile warmth. The room pulls everyone into one small circle of heat, breath, scent, and story. This is how the night begins, not with silence, but with closeness. Near the hearth, the pig has settled again, radiating the bold confidence of an animal, certain that warmth excuses any transgression. Its broad form catches the orange firelight on bristled back. It smells unmistakably of pig, straw, yard, and that deep, raw earthiness of a creature made for no one's comfort yet capable of providing it. In the corner, the goat folds its legs beneath itself with an air of reluctant acceptance, as if resenting yet submitting to its place. Beneath the bench, the chickens have knotted themselves into a small feathery cluster, shifting occasionally, muttering softly in sleep before sinking deeper into darkness. At night, the room's scents grow richer, deeper, the essence of life gathered close around the fire. Heat draws everything upward and inward. Smoke curls lazily beneath the rafters. Damp wool releases its musky scent, while straw exudes a dry, dusty sweetness. The lingering aroma of tallow fills the air if a candle has been lit. The pig adds its thick, animal warmth, and the goat contributes a faintly sour, familiar note. Beneath all these scents lie the steady, ancient tones of ash, earth, dung, and timber. It's not a scent that appeals in any polished sense. Rather, it's the honest smell of people and animals alive together in one room, while winter presses hard against the walls. Sometimes, a candle is worth the cost. Not every night. Tallow is too precious, and darkness too common to waste flame on mere vanity. Yet, when there is mending to be done, or things to sort, or a child still awake, or simply a need to make the room feel less swallowed by shadow, someone lights a little candle near the hearth. Its flame is small, yellow, and patient, not strong enough to brighten much, but enough to soften the gloom. Around its glow, faces grow gentler along their edges. Shadows become less uncertain. The low beams above seem to float in and out of sight, as though the hut itself breathes softly with the light. People draw near to one another now, closer than in summer, closer than comfort would choose, if comfort had room to choose at all. Shoulders rest against shoulders. Knees press against legs. A half-asleep child leans into an older body. A blanket is pulled over more than one pair of feet. There is no warmth here for privacy. Everything useful, fire, cloth, space, body heat, silence, must be shared. This is why the old stories belong to this hour. The day outside demands labor. But the night, if it offers anything, gives memory. No books exist here. No written pages pass from hand to hand. This room holds only voices, and the things voices keep alive. So when the bowls are empty, and the darkness thickens, and no more can be done with tools, mud, or straw, someone begins quietly, not loudly or dramatically. An old tale rises into the room like warmth itself. Slowly, almost shyly at first, a grandfather is perfectly suited to this task, or an aunt, or any voice worn smooth by long use. The tale need not be grand. A foolish king, a marsh spirit, a clever woman in winter, a saint who walked through snow, a beast heard in the hills. The truth of the story matters less than its age, its rhythm, and the fact that it has been told before, trusted to drift through the room without demanding sharp thought. Words gather themselves around the fire and pass gently from listener to listener, wrapping the dark in something older than the cold. Sometimes the story turns into a song. This is not a performance, nor an act done for applause. It's simply a tune, fragmented and returning on itself, much like the lingering winter evenings. A quiet hum, a few scattered lines, a voice, not loud, but unwavering, softly fills the room. The children settle into silence, while the adults keep their hands near the hearth, allowing the melody to envelop them like an extra blanket. No one needs every word. The body understands the rhythm and the repetition even when the mind cannot recall everything. Outside, Darkness deepens. The wind presses against the roof, making a bored mutter its low complaint. Somewhere, a crack in the wall lets in a thin thread of air, chilling enough to be felt, though invisible. The weather has not vanished. It's only been held at bay, kept at the room's edges for a while. This is the difference between the safety of night inside and the wild night outside. Not true security, but a fragile distance negotiated from danger. You sleep in your clothes. There's never been any real choice. Tunic, cloak, wrappings. Whatever can be worn without preventing sleep. Blanket covers it all, yet warmth still must be gathered from other sources. The fire, if it still burns, the pig, the goat, the breath of the person beside you, children and siblings, anyone willing and able to share a little heat. The sleeping room becomes a patchwork of borrowed warmth, awkwardly laid out, never quite enough. An elbow nudges your ribs. Someone turns, pulling the blanket away from your shoulder. A knee presses against your leg. The pig shifts with a heavy sigh. A chicken mutters beneath the bench before settling again. Somewhere, a sleeper coughs once, then twice. The fire crackles faintly, dwindling lower. None of this is peaceful in a refined sense, yet nothing feels strange. This is how rest takes shape in a winter hut, interrupted, full, smoky, alive. Frost begins to creep along the inner wall. Just a little, in a light whitening along a seam in the daub, a pale edge where cold has pressed long enough through the structure to leave its mark indoors. If you open your eyes during the night's final, weak light from the fire, you might glimpse it and immediately grasp, without effort, how fragile is the barrier between this room and the season outside. Sleep arrives in fragments. A descent into warmth, then waking as the fire shifts. Someone stirs. A drop from the roof finds a new path, or cold creeps through the straw to your feet. Then another drift downward, another surge of alertness. Night is never a single seamless rest. It is a series of small truces. And still, the hut holds. The hut's strength doesn't come from solid walls, a sturdy roof, or a kind floor. It holds firm because everything inside it shares something with everything else. The hearth offers its gentle warmth. The pig provides its deep, steady heat. Blankets trap each breath. Bodies press close together. Stories calm restless minds. Songs ease the darkness. Even fatigue becomes a kind of shelter, closing eyes softly while the storm rages outside. This hut is more than just a shelter. It is a living, shared source of heat, made of bodies, animals, firelight, memories, and exhaustion. This is the true secret. A room may be humble but can still save lives. A house might leak, smoke, and smell of goats, but still stands as the only boundary that truly matters. The family doesn't survive the night because the structure is grand or generous. They survive because everything inside has learned to lean into and support one another. For those few hours, the dark beyond stays outside. Not driven away, not defeated, just held gently at the threshold, as the room quietly works its ancient magic, keeping breath within bodies until morning. But winter isn't finished yet. Soon hardship will deepen and snowstorms relentless enough to bury roads, roofs, and entire days will arrive. Then winter changes its scale. Up till now, it's been a bodily struggle. Damp wool, cold floors, smoke-stinging eyes, hunger, cracked hands, and long, small humiliations. Hard certainly, but manageable with fire, straw, patched walls, and routine. But then winter grows beyond the body, beyond daily life. it becomes a powerful force. Paths vanish. Pens disappear beneath snow. Roofs sag under heavy weight. The whole village feels crushed beneath one endless white pressure. The first sign is often a sound. Not the usual wind brushing thatch or a creaking shutter, but something deeper, weather-laden with awe. Wait. Dot. Snow begins at the walls in soft touches, turns into a hissing brush, then a full roar of wind driving winter sideways through the dark. By morning, the hut no longer feels part of a village. It feels swallowed by the storm's fierce attention. The light changes as well. When you wake, the room is pale, lacking brightness, as if the sun is wrapped in fleece and set far away behind thick layers of snow and cloud. The darkness has thinned but not turned to day. It's a muffled, sealed light. Even the fire seems to burn more quietly. The pig near the hearth exhales small damp clouds. The goat shifts once, listening. A child coughs, and the sound disappears. Storm weather swallows all distance first, and when the door is pushed, it will not open properly. Morning announces itself gradually. The latch lifts. The wooden door eases open, but only an inch. That's when it meets resistance, packed snow holding it firm. Before water can be drawn, before breakfast is prepared, before the day can truly begin, the house must first be freed from the grip of winter. A spade is searched for. If none can be found, a board will do. If all else fails, it's hands and sheer determination that must do the work. The heavy snowdrift presses tight against the door, and the first chore each morning is simply creating enough of an opening to show that outside still exists. Beyond that door, the yard has transformed into something strange and unfamiliar. Fences have lost their usual form, appearing as gentle ridges beneath the snow's weight. The animal pen is no more than a ghostly shape hidden under thick white blankets. Steps vanish the moment they are made, swallowed again by fresh snowfall. The familiar world has been reshaped, rounded and smoothened, covered in snow, softened into contours, interrupted only by occasional dark lines of wood or the peak of a roof. The village remains, but only faintly, like bones visible beneath thinning skin. Paths must be carved out, first to the animals, then to the woodpile, and if strength permits, to the well. Each journey is slower, more arduous. Snow presses against the legs, sometimes reaching up to the knees, resisting every step. In some spots, a frozen crust breaks suddenly, plunging the body down with a sharp, cold shock into deeper drifts underneath. Wind blows loose powder into faces. Eyelashes gather moisture and freeze. Breath stings when inhaled. Outside, the world has become an endless effort wrapped in whiteness. At the well, the rope is stiff and unyielding. When the bucket is finally lowered, it knocks hollowly against the frozen lining. Water emerges dark and heavy beneath a fragile skin of ice. Each drop spilled feels like a loss that cannot be afforded. The icy water bites the hands almost immediately, turning sensation into pain. The handle, slick with cold, is hard to grip. Arms tire quickly. Water has always been precious, but in a storm, it takes on a new weight, as if it must be hauled home through a world determined to punish every task. Inside the hut, supplies take on new, urgent meanings. Wood is no longer just a pile. It represents evenings to be warmed. Grain is no longer mere food, but bowls remaining to nourish the family. Roots aren't simply gathered produce. They count the days yet to endure. Storm weather changes everything, turning objects into silent tallies. Around the hearth, the family counts nights, stretches thin the contents of the pot, and eyes the straw with worry, thinking ahead to dampness, sickness, and the risk of a failing roof. The animals sense the weight of the storm, too. The pig grows quiet, adopting the strange calm some creatures display when faced with overwhelming weather. The goat stamps once, then curls more tightly into a corner. Beneath the bench, the chickens crowd together, merging into one uneasy, feathered mass. Even the dog, if there is one, wastes no breath feigning courage. The whole room listens, and in such bad weather, news travels differently. In low voices, close to the door, news drifts in. Someone arriving late, trudging through a trench carved in the snow, ice clinging to their clothes, worry already etched on their face. A child runs a fever. The roof sags under heavy weight. A fence has collapsed. A neighbor calls for aid, help to clear a pen or lift a shutter jammed tight by ice. But no one speaks of these troubles with dramatics. The storm has already used every ounce of drama it could muster. What's left is practical sorrow. A small bowl of broth shared. A path carefully cut through the drifts. A bundle of sticks carried back. A body counted once at dusk and counted again come morning. And sometimes the storm's light turns almost beautiful. This is one of winter's cruelest tricks. Snow reflects light upward from the ground, making faces look ghostly. Lit from below, roofs and walls glow pale, like bleached bone. Smoke from chimneys lifts slowly, then drifts sideways into the thick white air. For a fleeting moment, the entire village seems sacred, preserved in a hush. But that beauty changes nothing. The ropes are still frozen solid. Doors remain jammed tight by ice. The sick still burn with fever. The cooking pot is still too thin to hold much heat. At its most ruthless, winter asks only a single question. Can this household hold itself together for one more day? Not forever. Not safely. Not with ease or grace. Just one more day. That's how the storm narrows life's horizon. The week dissolves. The month fades away. The once broad future shrinks into silence. There is only the roof overhead, the hearth's meager warmth, the well, the animal pen, the sick child, the stockpile of wood, the empty bowl, and the dark pressing in outside. If all of these can be held until nightfall, then the day has been met and survived. Yet even amid the storm's rage, life goes on, as it always does, digging, carrying, feeding, mending, waiting. This is the calm at the center of the storm's pressure. Someone cuts a trench through an icy drift. Another warms frozen rope between their hands to loosen it. Another stuffs moss into the cracks where the wind has started to find its way in. Someone gently checks on the sleeping child. Someone else feeds the pig. Another moves a damp branch closer to the fire's glow. Quiet prayers murmur barely audible, there in the breath itself. Storm or no storm, these small, steadfast acts persist. Life pushes forward, not because the weather allows it, but because people keep living regardless. By evening, the room feels smaller, cozier, but tighter. Wet cloths hang near the fire to dry. Melted snow drips into bowls placed beneath leaky spots in the roof. The cooking pot feels too small, too thin, too inadequate. Walls sweat where the cold outside meets the warmth inside. Frost creeps again around the edges of everything. Voices lower, shrinking to fit the scale of the space. Even the wind, though still hammering at the walls, seems distant, fainter than the simple rhythm of bodies breathing close around the heart. Pressure like this cannot stay at its highest point forever, and because it cannot, the smallest comforts now become treasures beyond measure. A scrap of onion, a bit of rabbit, a cup of hot water, a dry tunic. Tonight, these become more than mere necessities. They become lifelines, moments of hope in the storm's long night. In a room heavy with the weight of a long winter, every small comfort shifts the atmosphere with a gentle but profound touch. The onion simmers softly in the pot, its subtle scent curling through the chilly air, warming the hands that reach out before it can even warm the stomach. Nearby, the rabbit broth bubbles with steady tenderness, pouring warmth into bowls that have borne much yet continue to offer a measure of care. A cup of hot water sits by the hearth, fingers wrapped around it, drawing slow, deep breaths of comfort into the cold. A dry tunic, stitched roughly but with patience, holds the promise of protection from cold drafts and weariness. Each modest comfort carries a significance far greater than usual, because this household has learned to weigh the value of even the smallest provision. Focus settles on these humble treasures. The onion melds into the pottage, steam rising gently, brushing hair and cheek with warmth. The rabbit broth spreads its soft heat, flowing through empty hands and easing tense shoulders. Warm stones tucked beneath bedding release small, comforting waves of heat. Shoes patched and mended, now fit without pain or scraping. Pipe glows faintly, its soft smoke curling like music through the hut's still air. Nearby, a clean, folded shirt rests prepared for the coming night. A story murmurs gently by the fire, not for mere entertainment, but for solace. A quiet ritual anchoring the family through the long evening. Winter instills a unique lesson. The smaller the comfort, the more luminous its light. These simple pleasures, the gentlest broth, the warmest stone, a blanket shared, ripple quietly through the room, steadying both body and spirit. Gratitude rises softly, unheralded, gathering within the pauses between meals and chores. The mind notices these small reprieves. The body feels heat seep into stiff joints. Each tiny grace accumulates, lifting the burden of the evening, making it lighter than the day gone by. And when joys are so modest, gratitude slips in without resistance. There is no ceremony or pride, only a quiet acknowledgement of the rare sweetness found in survival. The smallest gestures, passing the rabbit, holding the warm cup, shifting one heated stone nearer to another, carry a weight far beyond their size in this harsh winter that has demanded everything else. The heart finds ease, even as the world outside remains unyielding. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the season begins to turn. The snow thins. A soft light mellows the frost-scarred walls. Green pushes tentatively toward the earth beyond the hut. Ice loosens its grip along the stream. Breath grows easier. The land, patient and steady, hints that it has not surrendered life. Inside the hut, these small comforts, the onion, the broth, the warm stones, the patched tunic, the whispered story, blend with this subtle change, carrying both hope and gratitude as winter starts to relax its hold. And one morning, though the cold still lingers, something in the air feels different, loosened by the promise of what lies ahead. You feel it first, even before you fully grasp what it is. Not warmth, not comfort, not yet. The floor beneath your feet remains cold. The hearth still requires coaxing to spark life. Your blanket carries the lingering sense of smoke, wool, and long use. But something has shifted. The morning no longer bites with the same harshness. The air's grip has softened, and it no longer feels as if winter is trying, with every breath, to freeze the whole world in place. Beyond the walls, the yard begins to soften. The snow is no longer a solid, unyielding expanse of white. It thins in patches, sinks along the edges, and darkens where the earth peeks through beneath. Along the eaves, water gathers and drips with a patient rhythm, not the sharp snap of a leak from inside the hut, nor the hard crack of frost shifting in darkness, but a gentler sound. The roof surrendering winter back to the ground, one clear beat at a time. That simple sound alone transforms the morning. So does the mud. Mud, no one calls it luxurious. It clings stubbornly to boots, steals footing, stains hems, and turns even short walks into slow journeys. Yet, after weeks of iron-cold earth and unforgiving frost, mud feels almost like a promise. The earth is stirring again, no longer locked tight. It yields beneath your steps, taking the imprint of each footfall. It reminds the body that beneath all the frost and whiteness and hardening, the land has been alive all along. Next, the stream begins to open. You hear it before you see it. A low, running murmur beneath the stillness of morning. Then the clearer voice of water flowing where once lay only ice. Approaching, you find the edges still rimmed with crusted ice, but the center has darkened and broken free. Water moves purposefully between the banks, almost startling after such long stillness. It catches the light, carries away tiny pieces of thawed earth, and flows on, regardless of whether anyone watches. That too feels like a sign larger than itself. Winter hasn't ended all at once. The wind can still cut sharp, mornings still sting. But the world is no longer holding its breath. Something has loosened. Something has begun again. Before anyone speaks it aloud, the birds already know. First, a single thin note floats above the yard, so light it might almost be mistaken for a memory. Then another answers. Then more, until the air itself seems woven with delicate, living sounds. Birdsong returns not with triumph, but cautiously, as if testing the season's sincerity. And the body responds almost immediately. Before thought can catch up, the chest loosens, shoulders lower. Something inside, long braced against cold, begins to unclench. Sunlight changes too. It's not just about brightness, the kind winter can be cruelly abundant with, when snow reflects every pale sunbeam straight into your eyes. It's about presence, real sunlight. A light that feels like it comes from somewhere warm, even if that warmth hasn't quite touched your skin yet. It stretches across the yard, gathers on the walls, glints in the damp spots. It reaches the stream and the dripping roof, transforming what once seemed like hardship into something more like life and movement. The body notices these subtle signals. It turns toward them, almost shyly, sensing the shift. Then come the first shoots. Tiny green sprouts pushing up through the dark, wet earth where the snow has retreated. There aren't many, too few to change the color of the landscape. Yet these small, delicate signs are narrow, vulnerable, and utterly impossible not to love. People find themselves gazing at them longer than intended. When winter lingers for too long, one small green blade can hold more hope than an entire summer field, because abundance in summer is expected. These tender signs are the world quietly proving it hasn't given up after all. Frogs return in their own good time. Their calls rise from the damp places, ditches and thawed edges, low, alive, and curiously almost humorous after months of silence. Hearing them, you'll know that the season has shifted in ways your eyes alone can't measure. The cold still visits. Frost may yet come back during the night. But the deep grip of winter has finally broken. Mornings themselves grow less harsh. Perhaps this is the mercy the body recognizes most. Drawing water at dawn no longer feels like punishment from a frozen world. The well rope remains cold, but it no longer bites. The breath in the room no longer hangs thick with the weight of winter. The hut walls drip more often than they frost. Boots still soak through, but now from mud and melting snow rather than biting ice. The difference might seem small in one way, yet enormous in another. Pain hasn't disappeared. It has simply changed shape. And that is the first real victory. Not warmth itself. Change. The initial triumph over winter isn't when comfort arrives suddenly and all at once. It's when the land admits it can move again. Water falling, ice loosening, birds returning, green rising, sounds replacing silence, motion where there was once stasis. The body, having endured so much by lowering expectations, barely dares to trust this shift at first. But it feels the world turning and begins, gently, to move with it. And once the world starts to stir, the heart follows. Slowly, cautiously, not with celebration yet. Winter has taught caution too well for that. Hope slips back in carefully, like a shy creature testing the edges of a room before stepping inside. It reveals itself in small ways. The pause by the stream that lingers longer than needed, a face gently turning toward the doorway's light, the silence about the green shoots, as if speaking too much might shatter this fragile season. But still, the change is undeniable. The roof drips gently instead of cracking. The yard yields softly instead of shattering. Birds fill the air, not just the wind. The stream murmurs its story. The mud welcomes every footfall. After so long focused solely on survival, the world begins to lean in a different direction. With the thaw, a new kind of labor emerges, not about enduring death, but about preparing for life. The hands that all winter nurtured the fire now turn toward the earth. This is how the season truly shifts. It's not just in the bird song, the dripping roofs, or the melting ice along the stream. It's in the work the body suddenly takes on. Throughout the cold months, those same hands were busy with the smallest acts of survival. Gathering damp branches, stuffing moss into cracks in the walls, coaxing flame from ashes, carrying water through frost, keeping bowls close for warmth. Now, they are called outward, downward to the soil. First come the tools, not with fanfare, nor as if a festival has arrived. They are quietly fetched from wherever they have waited through winter, wedged in corners, buried under old straw, rusted, muddy, and forgotten. A spade with a cracked handle, a hoe worn by too many seasons and too few repairs, a wooden rake missing a tooth. The plow, when it appears, feels less like a hopeful instrument and more like a tired relic brought back from memory. Yet each tool is studied with the gravity it deserves. Winter demanded fire. Spring demands tools. These tools must be repaired before they can be trusted. Handles are tightened with cord, iron edges realigned, splinters carefully shaved away, pegs replaced. The work is meticulous and unremarkable, done mostly in silence. Not because silence is sacred, but because everyone understands what's at stake. A broken tool in planting season is no mere inconvenience. It means delay. And in a world like this, delay can turn into hunger by autumn. So the old tools are readied as best as possible. They may lack beauty, but they are willing. Next come the seed pouches, and the room changes. Carefully brought out, they rest in hands that have measured food and losses, fire and evenings. The pouches are small and worn, tied and retied with string softened by use. Inside, to the eye, there's almost nothing. Just a handful of grain, a few peas, some beans, perhaps something green to come if weather and fortune smile. Yet despite their modest contents, these seeds carry a weight far greater than what they appear. After a winter of empty stores, this is the first true promise of abundance again. No one treats seeds casually. They are too light, too quiet, and filled with a future that is uncertain yet full of hope. As the pouches open, people instinctively lean in closer, drawn by an unspoken pull. A child might be gently warned not to touch. An older hand reaches in, fingers pinching the seeds, eyes narrowing, measuring not just the quantity, but the promise they hold. The seeds carry a faint scent of dryness, dust, and the warmth of last summer's sun. They seem almost too small to matter, yet the entire season pivots around these tiny kernels. And then the field summons its call. This ground is not yet gentle. Though softened by the thaw, softness does not mean ease. Damp earth clings stubbornly to boots and tools alike, having been buried beneath the cold for long months. The soil bears a certain weight. There is resistance here. It demands effort to be opened. Oxen are brought in when available, broad, steaming beasts whose breath mists the cool air, their patience no surer than that of those steering them. Harnesses are double-checked, ropes tested taut. The plow aligns with the first furrow. Then the field begins to yield. The blade bites into the soil. The earth gives way. Behind the plow rise dark, wet furrows, heavy and rich, smelling of decay, rain, and the ancient, restless life stirring beneath the surface. This work is anything but delicate. From the very first moment, bodies lean fully into it. Boots slip as arms strain, backs bend, quickly learning the rhythm of the day ahead. Yet, unlike the weary defense of winter labor, this toil is forward-moving. It does not simply resist the season, it propels into what's to come. This shift lives as much in the workers' bodies as in the field itself. You sense it in how people collaborate. One hand guides the plow, another steadies it. Someone trails behind with a pouch of seeds. Children are sent off to fetch or carry, kept safe from the oxen, yet close enough to absorb the memory. The work remains grueling. The soil spares neither shoulders nor knees, but it is no longer a struggle against death. It is the hard labor of crafting a future. Each furrow becomes a canvas for the hand's answer. Stepping into the freshly opened line, you start to sow. One pinch of seed, then another. The motion is so slight, it might seem laughably small after the vastness of winter. Yet this is planting's nature. It asks the body to place faith in the little things, small grains, narrow spaces, fragile hopes repeated countless times across the field, until repetition itself becomes trust. People speak in different tones here. Perhaps not much, or even not at all in some homes. But even silence transforms during planting. Someone murmurs counts under their breath. Another utters a saint's name, an old blessing, or simply stay as seeds drop into the darkness. Grandmothers whisper the same words year after year. Fathers may remain silent, yet handle each handful with solemn reverence akin to prayer. In such a place, hope is rarely loud. Instead, it is buried softly, a pinch at a time. To plant in this world is an act of faith, both practical and deeply emotional. No one here is under any illusions about farming. The rain might not come. The frost could return unexpectedly. Birds may feast more greedily than hoped. Rot might set in, and food supplies could dwindle before the harvest season arrives. Everyone understands this perfectly well. Yet, that's exactly why planting holds such significance. It's not blind optimism detached from reality. It's realism that chooses action in spite of uncertainty. To sow seeds after a harsh winter is to acknowledge the unknown and still bend low to the soil with determination. By midday, backs begin to throb with a familiar ache. Arms slow down their rhythm. Palms darken and roughen. Moist earth works stubbornly into every crack of the skin and lingers there. Even the oxen grow weary and need to rest. Tools rest upright for brief moments while the workers stand, stretch, wipe sweat away with sleeves, drink deeply, and gaze over the field, not at what lies there now, but at what might someday emerge. No one calls this feeling joy just yet. It is too early for that. But there is purpose, and that sense of purpose can warm the body nearly as much as a hot broth. Then, work resumes. More furrows are carved, more seeds scattered carefully along the dark lines. Step by deliberate step, the field begins to take shape, not a promise of abundance or guaranteed success, but of intention. And in a year so harshly marked by scarcity, even that intention feels monumental. Each seed is a tiny promise placed into the dark earth by tired but willing hands. This, above all else, is the gentlest truth of the day. It's not that spring has fully arrived, or winter has been forgotten, or the harvest is ensured. None of that is certain. What is certain is simpler yet profound. The body, having endured, now dares to begin anew. The hand opens. The seed falls. The earth receives. And in this quiet cycle, repeated hundreds of times, something inside the household quietly starts to unfurl into hope. By evening, the labor's marks return with everyone. Mud splattered on boots, soil ingrained beneath fingernails, shoulders bowed not from cold but from exertion. Tools lean again by the wall, no cleaner than before but honest from use. Hot simmers at the hearth. Seats are taken more slowly, bread torn with greater hunger. Outside, the field stands faintly marked by fresh lines and charged with new desire as light fades. Inside, the room carries a different kind of exhaustion, one seasoned by purpose rather than mere survival. And as more people move from winter's toil into spring's work, the village itself begins to change. What comes with spring is not only the return of light, but the gentle, fuller presence of community. The village breathes anew. The church bells ring out, clear and gentle, announcing the world's awakening from winter's grip. Neighbors exchange news by the edges of their yards, their voices carrying over sunlit paths and muddy roads. Barefoot children dart through the village, scattering the first delicate flowers that survived the thaw. The sound of flutes and singing blend softly in the open air, lifting melodies above damp, forgiving fields. A shared meal is spread beneath a makeshift awning or laid simply on a plank of wood. Eggs, fish, small fruits and grains are quietly offered, passed around, and received with heartfelt joy. Laughter floats through the yard, not loud or boastful, but enough to mark the clear difference between yesterday and today. Garlands of early blossoms adorn fences. Bees hum carefully as they return to the garden. The sun glints on damp furrows and bright petals alike, painting the world with colors reborn. No one moves alone. The harsh work of winter was endured, but never in solitude. Now, spring's labor feels lighter precisely because it is shared. Every lifted spade, every furrow sown, every bucket of water carried becomes part of a rhythm pulsing through the village itself. Conversations flow between tasks, woven together with songs and footsteps. Small celebrations mark each modest achievement. The sense of isolation melts away into collective motion, the gentle negotiation of needs, laughter, and the simple joy of community, breathing together. Surviving winter was never just an individual effort. Spring reveals this truth clearly. What mattered most during the long, brutal months wasn't the endurance of a single person, but the endurance of everyone. Shared warmth, shared work, and shared small victories kept each household going through the dark days. Now, as the air softens and the sun extends its reach, these bonds grow even firmer, made more visible when contrasted with the silent, solitary days recently past. Voices carry abundance. Everyday words, once whispered out of routine or necessity, now sound rich with meaning. One story told aloud becomes a melody. A single song hummed near the fire swells into a chorus of connection. The return of eggs to the table, the flight of a newly emerged bee, the bloom of a flower at the garden's edge, all remind the body that the season has shifted, and that enduring hardship has yielded gentle rewards. The village is alive and social again. People gather for meals, news, music, and simple play. Children chase one another across open yards. Flutes and songs blend with animal sounds, the bark of a dog, the rooting of a pig, birds calling softly. The air tastes of sun, water, and the faint sweetness of renewed life. Conversations don't shout. They flow with intention and ease, like a slow river of human sound carrying the community from mere survival into shared presence. After such prolonged silence, even ordinary voices now sound like abundance. Sunlight stretches across every surface it can find. Flowers burst into bloom, bees hum busily, and neighbors exchange smiles tinged with cautious hope. The narrative of winter's hardship, its biting cold, relentless hunger, and the heavy burden of endurance, begins to fade softly into memory. The listener senses a subtle shift. The weight on their shoulders lightens, their breath deepens, their heart opens, connecting with shared experience. The village, once silent and muted, now hums gently with renewed life. Gradually, the story's hold begins to loosen, because the toughest days are behind them. The frost that once gripped the earth has softened. Tender green shoots emerge from the soil. Hope, much like the returning light and the chorus of sounds, spreads steadily, inviting the mind and body to exhale after the long, harsh winter. They prepare themselves quietly for what lies ahead. Survival begins to transform back into life. There's a moment when the body senses it before the mind fully does. The harshest storms have passed. Frost edging the floor softens and retreats. The thick, layered blankets rest lighter but warmer on weary shoulders. The roof holds steady above, sheltering from moisture, and the walls breathe less chill than they have in countless months. Dawn greets with the cautious song of birds, a tentative chorus growing stronger with the rising sun. Green shoots push through softened earth in the fields. The pottage tastes of genuine nourishment rather than mere necessity. Bread feels tender, and water flows with renewed ease. The body no longer tenses at every creak, every passing draft, every shifting floorboard. It's endured enough now to allow a beginning of trust. Even the very room seems to breathe with a different rhythm. The hearth's pig shifts, settling in with more comfort. The goat stretches freely, unbothered. Chickens shuffle gently beneath the bench, their movements soft and calm. Smoke rises lazily from the fireplace, no longer stinging eyes. The air carries the flavor of warmth, labor, and patience rewarded. Hands once stiff with cold find ease. Fingers regain strength. Each body in the household loosens just enough to sense that life can be tender after so much hardship. The deepest relief is not found in abundance. It lies in the absence of relentless fear. There is no sudden feast, no miraculous burst of spring. Instead, a quiet understanding settles. The nights won't crush the household entirely. Warmth can endure, and the pottage no longer needs to be rationed so tightly for survival. This knowledge seeps in like a gradual tide. Muscles unclench, breaths grow fuller. Eyes can close without bracing for pain, hunger, or cold. The room, the family, the day itself begin to feel less like a trial and more like a pattern fully mastered. And when fear finally loosens its grip, even the most exhausted find themselves sensing happiness once again. It's fragile, subtle, yet undeniably real. A hand reaches out to touch warm bread. A glance lingers on a neighbor's face. A body relaxes into straw bedding. No grand event unfolds, only a string of small mercies, repeated patiently until they mean everything. Slowly and gently, the body relearns to trust itself and the world. Just a bit, one soft movement at a time. Let's bring everything together now. The cold, the smoke, the hunger, the labor, and the patience, into one final, gentle reflection. The household remains in the same room, gathered around the same fire, lying on the same straw. Yet something subtle has shifted. Every task completed, every hardship faced, every single day survived adds up to a quiet memory, a humble victory within the home. There is nothing heroic here, nothing loudly celebrated. Instead, there is the profound ordinariness of life, seen through the bodies and the warmth they share with one another. You made it through winter. Now the hearth feels familiar, but also transformed. The fire, the straw, the family, all unchanged, yet each element is softer, safer, more steady. Memories rise, cracked hands roughened by work, smoke lingering in the rafters, the pig's comforting warmth beside the hearth, the first taste of pottage after a long day, frozen mornings yielding at last to sunlight, the first flower breaking through, the first effortless slice of bread, the first breath without bracing against the cold. The body remembers all of this and begins to relax. It feels everything it has endured and everything it has survived. The true triumph was never grand or heroic. It was domestic, repetitive, anonymous, and deeply human. Life was lived through small acts of care, the repeated tending of the body, the hearth, the food, the tools. Each careful gesture, each small and steady survival means more than any crown or battlefield glory. It is through these quiet, persistent rhythms that the household endured. And now the body knows it can let go. You bent, nearly broke, yet somehow you remained. The warmth stays. The fire flickers softly. The straw shifts beneath sleeping bodies. Outside, the cold still lingers, but inside, everything needed has been preserved and carried forward. Breathing slows, hearts calm, world feels steady. Now, at last, you can allow yourself to settle, knowing that the household, like you, has survived, and like you, it can rest. So the voice grows softer, welcoming the listener to rest where the people of this story longed all through winter to rest, warm enough, fed enough, truly at home. The long night continues. Onda. All is quiet. The winter is behind us. Now, only warmth, breathing, and the slow, comforting rhythm of survival remain.